Hey, and welcome to a wall in my house with two drawings pinned up onto the wall. Pretty sweet, right? So people have been asking me for a while about how I think about my Mechadoodles. And so I figured I'd put together this video to kind of give you like an overview and hopefully help some of you with your problems with mechanical stuff. Because I know that it's really intimidating. It intimidated me for a really long time. This isn't really a tutorial on like how to draw a car or anything like that. This is more for just for freeform stuff to kind of get you into the correct mindset, so that you might be able to approach those things, or maybe just work through whatever drawing fears you have, because there's really no wrong way to do a Mechadoodle. So the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to drawing mechanical stuff, or specifically when we're talking about Mechadoodles, is perspective. If you don't understand perspective, or at least the principles of it, you're gonna have a very, very difficult time. I'm sure that it's possible to not understand it and still do it, but it's gonna take you a very long time. So I'm just drawing a quick 1-point perspective. And then nice viewpoint, cube, where lines go back to a vanishing point. That's not a cube at all. And I'm just freehanding this stuff. I'm trying to keep it sort of in my head rather than make it just a thing that I'm repeating and not understanding. So really the only thing that you need to understand about perspective is that all lines are going to converge if they're parallel. So if we're looking at a box, the side of a box that looks like this, and maybe it has two lines on it, if we make one side converge, it's going to make it look like it's going back into space, right? These all converge somewhere back here. And that's really the biggest principle that we deal with when we're doing Mechadoodle stuff. All the pieces don't need to go back to the same vanishing point. In fact, I would be really surprised if anybody could find like a few different parts of my Mechadoodles that go back to the same vanishing point. And if it does happen, it's purely by accident. I really don't think about that in any way. The only thing that I'm thinking about when I'm doing Mechadoodles is, let's say this is a part here, is that this part that I'm drawing looks like that it's going to the same vanishing point. And notice, we'll get into the next bit. Notice that I kind of messed up this line. When you're Mechadoodling, there's no such thing as messing up, because that is now makes that piece look like, if we're looking at it from the top, like that. And as far as I'm concerned, that's completely fine, since whatever I'm making is not thought out. It's just whatever it is, whatever happens, and that's what it looks like. But before we get too far into that, I wanted to talk about how mechanical stuff, really anything in general, to make it look more detailed, is just putting more stuff into it, right? Obviously it has to be the right stuff. But the quote-unquote right stuff is very mutable. And as far as Mechadoodles go, the only thing that makes it the right stuff is for it to have like hard edges, and that's not even a steadfast rule, because like if we turn this into something, we'll make it into some kind of vent or whatever. So we have these little vents that go back through, and then we'll put an ellipse on the back like a cylinder, and then we're going to use an organic shape to make a tube, and then maybe we'll put another ellipse on the end. And as long as, so as I was drawing that, I realized if I ended it in a square, that might be weird, but we might actually be able to get away with it if we are clever about it. So if I do that, then it's just to show that there is a line that kind of comes back, and then maybe it does one of these. And that's going to take a little bit of getting to know three-dimensional forms and stuff, but I'm sure that any of you could do this as long as you have some understanding of perspective, and you've practiced getting it to be more intuitive. We'll cover exercises of how to do that in a later video. As I mentioned before, your perspective does not need to be perfect. You'll notice that when I drew this line, while it does converge with that top one, these lines converge kind of weirdly, but nobody's going to notice if any of these lines are messed up, because when you put them next to a bunch of other crazy stuff that's going on, people are less likely to notice. And that kind of leads me into my next thing, which is things don't need to be correct perspective. They just need to be like a little, I would say probably like a little bit over 50% correct. And to illustrate my point, so let's say that we want to do, we want to make a cylinder, right? So what we want it to look like is this. And then we're going to put a little lip on it. And then it's recessed inside. So that's what we want it to look like right there, right? Move that over to the side. But let's say that we did this, and then we did the bottom here, and then we go to draw our ellipse, and it's like that. And then we're like, oh crap, that's not right, right? Not true. Because we can still salvage it. And that's really what Mechadoodles are all about, is like salvaging the mess ups. And the way that we salvage it is we lean into the mistake. So yeah, this is a crooked ellipse, a crooked cylinder, but we meant to do that. And how do we show that we meant to do that? Well, when we do the recess in here, we just make sure that it kind of lines up with this bottom ellipse, and maybe we'll throw another ellipse in there to really double down on it. And now that looks like I meant to do that, right? Looks like some kind of exhaust tip or what have you. And the same thing can happen with boxes, where say that what we want to do is a rectangular prism of some kind. But what we actually end up doing is we mess up that part, and then we're like, oh no, Do I have to erase that? No, we just put another edge on there, a corner, and then we just connect them. And it looks like I meant to do that, right? And so Mechadoodles are really just doing that over and over and over again. And not only that, sometimes I do this kind of stuff on purpose. I do this stuff on purpose. I will purposely just, let's say that we wanted to connect this piece to something else over here. I will just like throw down a shape like that, and then I'll be like, all right, well, now I have to solve whatever that shape is. So maybe this is some kind of tube that got thinner for some reason right in here. I don't know why. Maybe it's got like a sheath on the end of it, and then maybe it's got a little bit on the end like fit over something maybe. And maybe that's not like a round thing. Maybe it's a cylinder here. And then we connect it coming back this way. I'm going to keep it relatively simple with a little tube, and we'll extend down that cylinder. And now I'm just kind of making stuff up. And you'll see what I meant to do here was I wanted to do like a little rim in here so that it looks like there's some negative space in here. But then I kind of went off a little bit up, which is completely fine. Because you can just, like, nobody's going to call you out on it because they don't know what it looks like either. You don't know what it looks like. They don't know what it looks like. It's fine. And you kind of just need to like learn to kind of roll with it. And like once you kind of adapt to this kind of thinking, when you see stuff like this, where an ellipse can't really fit onto another ellipse, this being another cylinder ellipse. So what we do is we just do that, and all that looks intentional. When in reality, we had no idea what we were doing from the beginning. All we're doing is kind of leveraging the different perspective stuff. And then I want to go over kind of improvising a little bit. So let's say that we have a line that goes like this. Now, we have a lot of choices here. I'm going to put it on a different layer, and we're going to go through like a couple different iterations of what we can do with this line. So first, we could have to pick whether to extend it that way into the picture plane or towards us. Well, we don't need to, but for this exercise, yeah. In 3D programs, you might refer to this as extruding. So first, let's bring it towards us a little bit. And we're going to keep it very simple. And we're just gonna add like some thickness here. And the way that we're doing this is just basically drawing a parallel line, the first one, and then we're connecting it with lines that theoretically, when in doubt, try and converge it to some point out in the distance, right? And then now, we'll just simplify the bottom. Now we have this vertical plate. And you'll see that I like tipped in the ends because technically there would be some vanishing point out this way. And you don't even need to be worried about whether that's correct or not, because let's say that I did this instead, right? Well, instead, my brain doesn't tell me, oh, this is converging to the same point as this one because it's in perspective. What it's actually telling me is that from the side, if we're going to look at it from the side view, we'll move this stuff up. Oops. Can I not move both of them at the same time? without the transform tool. Apparently not. Alright, so from the side, what we're actually seeing is, I have to get a pen tool, is something like this instead of this, right? So you're kind of relying on people's gullibility. I often say that is all smoke and mirrors, and that's kind of why I say that, right? Because people want to believe that it's correct, so it will be. It's a magic trick. Now we're gonna duplicate this layer actually. All right, so remember, last time we went towards us, and this time we're gonna go away from us. We're gonna project it into the picture plane. I usually draw like one thing over, just, I don't know, that's how my brain works. But really what I'm thinking about is we're doing parallel lines into the distance. And you'll notice that this isn't quite parallel. It's the same thing as before. It's not gonna, nobody's gonna call you out on it because it looks intentional, right? Like as long as you connect the bits, nobody's gonna call you on it. If you make bad lines like those, they might call you on it. But like there's the attempt of it going in there, and instead of it looking wrong, people just see it as three-dimensional, right? Like that doesn't look any less three-dimensional than where, oh, second. I just realized that I got rid of my example line. So, for the sake of argument, let's say that I literally just copy and pasted this line. That might be helpful. And we're gonna compare this to the shape that we just made. And we're gonna see which shape looks more believable, this one or the other one. Now, I am, like I said from the beginning, I am leaning on some perspective knowledge here. So I am doing subtle things like tilting in the ends here to make it seem like we're looking kind of at the center of this. So it's not completely fair to say that you can do whatever you want, but from my perspective, I'm not sure how you would mess it up. That sounds really bad. I'm sure that it's possible to mess it up, but I'm just digging myself into a hole we're gonna move on. So we're gonna just move this down and turn on this layer. Now, which one of these looks more believable in three-dimensional space to you? Because to me, they look the same amount of believable. Don't they? And so that's how I come up with all the different little parts and stuff. Is I'll just draw a line sometimes. Like I'm basically solving a puzzle as I'm going. So if I just like draw a line like this, I'm like, all right, well, what is that gonna be? Like, it's the edge of something. So maybe in this circumstance, I would do something like this. And then maybe bring it down. And then we'll put a little notch in it, and at this corner, it'll turn, and then it'll get big again. Another corner, and we'll go this way, and then maybe we'll combine what we learned before and put an ellipse on here. Ellipses are very tricky, obviously. And I think that's probably the hardest part about the Mechadoodles, is getting the ellipses to be right some of the time. Or the majority of the time, I guess. More than half. So now that I've gone through this, I wanted to address the building up of smaller parts to make bigger parts, right? And it seems like I'm doing it at random, and it sort of is, in that I'm not doing it necessarily very consciously in a lot of them. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But the basic principle that I am dealing with is basically, if I draw a rectangle, it's kind of bland, right? So how would you make it more interesting? Well, let's put a line, but let's not make the line go all the way across, because that would be kind of expected, right? So we're gonna make it turn, and we'll carry it all the way up to the top. Why not? And then we're gonna make that. We're gonna make another rectangle in here, because why not? And then we're going to divide this into more shapes. And then let's do, we haven't done this. We're going to cut out another rectangle to make this L shape. And that's way more interesting than a rectangle, right? And I can already hear, like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Well, when I'm doing the Mechadoodles and I'm going along, and let's say I'm going to use the same kind of layout, but I'm going to do it, I'm going to kind of take it to the next level and make it 3D, and hopefully it'll make more sense. So the way that I would go about this, but I'm going to still use the same layout, I would start maybe with a shape that looks like this, and then I'm like, alright, I'm making kind of a rectangle shape, but a rectangle shape is going to make this whole thing look like it's made out of bricks or something. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it up. So we're going to cut it in a little bit, and then we're going to bring this back. And notice, obviously, that this is not going to match up with this as far as size goes, because of this line here. If I did this, it's a very different shape than if I do this. So what I'm doing is, instead of making a rectangle now I'm making like an L shape, which will coincide with this kind of a shape, right? And all of these lines, like, are fairly believable that they're gonna get to the same vanishing point, though I guarantee you that they probably don't. They probably get kind of close. They kind of get close, but actually that one is way off. But it's believable enough. All right, so I have this, and we'll give it some kind of thickness, like that, right? And then I'm like, well, all right, what's the next shape I want to do? We'll do this. I need something to, like, go up to make it a little bit more interesting, so that the back here is not just flat, right? And maybe this is brick. In my head, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Now, if I wasn't doing this exercise, I wouldn't have been doing these erases or undos. I would have just been rolling with it. But because I'm trying to show this principle I'm allowing myself some undos. And then we have to accommodate for this rectangle here. And the reason that we put that there when it was 2D is because we just wanted the shape to be more interesting. And you can already see, like, this is not really super interesting. But then we add this rectangular shape. And this one is we're gonna do the opposite. So from this shape to this shape is pushing up. So this shape in here is gonna go down. And it could go up, it could go down. That's completely up to you. I'm just picking for it to go down. I feel like it. All right, and then over here, we now have to do this L shape. And I think the easiest way for me to go about doing that is going to be, I'm actually going to do this square rectangle. That's a rectangle. I know shapes. And we would just add that in here. And this is a lot more difficult than a Mechadoodle is because I'm actually trying to reference something. But for you fine folks, you'll be able to work it out. And then we have this L shape that's going to be like that. And this is all just because in my head I'm kind of breaking down this rectangle, right? Instead of doing, hang on, let's match this up. Instead of me doing this, I do this instead. And it's not really any harder than doing the thing up top here. It's just repeating this shape. And the same principles apply here. First I'm gonna spread this out a little bit. And then I'm gonna duplicate this to show you what happens if I quote unquote messed it up. So let's say that we're doing this top box shape here. And instead I went here and then I did that. Oh no, I messed it up, right? Not really. Like now instead of looking down from the top and seeing a rectangle, now what we're doing is we're looking down and we're seeing rectangles like maybe this. So instead we're seeing this. Is that right or wrong? You decide for yourself. I think it looks cooler than a rectangle personally, so I think I did myself a favor by doing that. And if it really bothered you and you wanted it to be a rectangle, like if you wanted it to look like a rectangle and you could spot that you messed it up, then you just make another layer. Bang! Now it's now from the top it's going to look like a rectangle. Fancy, right? Now, to get into like a little bit more complicated stuff, just to like get you moving on the Mechadoodle thing. A lot of people have talked about, have told me that my stuff looks, the difference between my stuff and the stuff that they're doing, my stuff looks like that it's functional. I do have a lot of experience with mechanical stuff. I played with Legos a lot when I was a kid, Connects. I took apart remote control cars. I had a high-end remote control car when I was a kid, and I was really into it. I've always been into engineering, but I think I'm pretty confident that just by learning a few simple joints can go really far, and playing around with different ideas based on those joints. So I just want to show you like the most basic thing ever, and then you can kind of just riff on it and come up with your own stuff. And that's basically what I'm doing. So the most basic thing to do is, let's say you have this block here, and you want to connect it to this block over here. And notice this could have been a rectangle, but it's all right. People will believe it. Fine. All you got to do is put an ellipse there, and then you indent it a little bit. Not as much as the thing, because you need a little bit of space to grip, right? And then you just throw like a screw on it, or something, like a screw head. Done. Looks like a joint. And what you're portraying here is, like if we were to look at it from the top, is, and if we're seeing through it, is that there's an axle in here, right? So then you can kind of play around with this theme, and we're going to turn it so that we can see a little bit more. This is kind of where the perspective kind of needs to be right, in that like these, they don't need to align, but they need to look like that they do. And actually I kind of drew this a little bit off. I think it would have had to go down a little bit more to make this work. So what if we just added, so this axle comes through, and then we throw an ellipse shape, like a cylinder shape in there. Though at this point that curve could be, it could be a donut kind of a deal, or it could be a disc in there, a series of discs. It could be a lot of different things. And then what if there's another one of these blocks? Now all of a sudden we have a much more complicated block. And then, or joint, sorry. And then you can just keep doing, like you can just keep repeating that. You can add another block there. And this is really just how things get complicated, is just by continuing to add these different facets of the objects that you're making. So, the other thing that I wanted to mention is filling in gaps. So let's say that we have overhang here. I'm keeping the shapes more simple. It's almost like I'm building out of wood instead of metal at this point. So say that we have all these shapes going on, and then we realize we have this gap here. I don't really know what to put in there. There's a lot of different strategies and techniques to fill that gap. One of my favorites is, if you've watched my stream before, you know that I use this quite often, spaghetti wire. And that's just making like a tangle of wires. I'm not really thinking about stuff other than making overlapping tubes. Sometimes I'll throw in like a thicker tube, thinner tube. It's all up to your preferences. And some of them are going the same way and some of them aren't. And people will just look at that and be like, yeah, of course, those spaghetti wires, they go to all kinds of different stuff in there. I'm sure there's like hydraulics or electrical bits or something. And then there's also another quick one is um, like you could just throw like some kind of vent thing in there, and all that is very thin rectangular prisms, and then um, that's not really super convincing. Well, actually, that looks kind of fine. And you have two options here. You can make it so that the thin things are the fins, or it could be the thick pieces are the fins. If you go with the thick ones, then I want to hit that like that. If you go with the thin ones, I would probably recommend putting some kind of wow, I'm blanking on the term there. Hopefully I'll remember it before the end of the video, or I'll just edit it in. No, I won't because I'm terrible at editing. The word is ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion. You knew this. But you can also put like blocks in between to kind of help break up that space. And yeah. Thank you for making it to the end of this video because I know it's kind of long and I probably talked a little bit in circles, but hopefully you got something out of it, right? If after this video you are so inclined to make a Mechadoodle, I would love to see your stuff down in the comments, and please give me feedback on the video and maybe further videos that you'd like to see from me. Yeah. Go draw. See you next time.